this part is to set the value for those global macro variables. So this part is here. So it is include that we're gonna set the path of the local folders, which is this part. And also we're gonna define that if we define the folder, the subfolder to hold the downloaded zip files, the folder to hold the final database, and also we're gonna define the suffix of the zip files and the file names inside each zip. And also the URL, the web address to download these source files from the website, and also to include the supporting macros. So I want to highlight one thing here, so which is this line. So here I tried to define the web address using this global variable called the URL. So this one is comprised of two parts. One is the fixed string, which is this part. The other is a dynamic part, which is defined by the zip name .zip. But watch this. So to this point, I have not defined this zip file name. So when I run this, it's going to give a warning message that says that it does not know what is the reference for the zip name. Right? So the zip name variable was indeed defined in this macro when downloading the file, in which the global variable URL will be used. Yeah. So in the supporting macros, there is a macro called the download DPD file, in which I'm going to define the zip name there, which is a local variable inside this this macro. And with that, I'm going to run the following lines to have this URL. So what I want to highlight is that despite that I defined the URL outside of this macro, but because I'm going to take the value of the zip name, so actually that URL value is going to change as long as I change the zip name. So in this case, so when I change the zip name, for example, the first one will be all files, the second will be all file underscore IA. When I change the zip name, it is going to change the value of the URL. So it enables that each time it is going to go to a different web address and download the corresponding file. I don't know what it means to you, but to me it is against my intuition because I only defined the URL once. But actually that value is dynamic depending on the change of the value in this zip name. So I have a test here. So the first is that this line is to delete all the previously existing values if there is any. Then I'm gonna define a global value called a variable 1. All right, and then I'm gonna define that this variable 1 should have the value of a fixed string and then the value of the variable 2. So I'm going to define this. All right. So again, you know, it's the similar idea that it's going to give me this 1 and say that variable 2 was not defined. All right. So then I'm going to go on and to define variable 2, and then I'm going to check the value in variable 1. And now you can see that the value has changed, and so the newly assigned value in variable 2 was in this variable 1. And then I go on and change the value in variable 2, and then I'm going to display the value in variable 1 again, and you see that this time the second part was replaced with the new value. So so this variable 1 is going to have a dynamic value depending on the change of the value in variable 2. Well, this type of change is going to happen regardless of whether or not this variable 2 is a global variable or it is a local one within a macro. Like if I try this one, so I'm going to have the second part changed as well. So my learning from this is that you got to be super careful when you define a variable if there is a dynamic part, because this part will change. And you might think that, well, I defined that once and that value is fixed. Actually, it is not. It is going to change. So you got to be careful for that. So in this case, so it sounds like the line plays the trick, and actually it is an accident. I was not intended to do that, and I don't like that. So it's better to put it more explicitly. For example, like change this to a root and without this part, and always redefine the URL when you need it. Right, in other words, we're going to define a root here, and then later in the macro to download the DPD files. Now I'm going to make this URL local. I'm going to make it local, and then I'm going to redefine this URL file each time by taking the global value and the updated zip value. So each time I'm going to have a new URL. This is more clear and explicit for me to understand. Sorry, in the URL name I should have a slash here. But anyway, you get a point that this is a more easier way for the programmers to understand. But anyway, I'm gonna still in the files for downloading in the programs, I'm still gonna keep the original way, and I put a note there to know these changes. I think it is a good learning that we should be careful when using a dynamic string to define a variable because the value is going to change. And sometimes if you don't pay attention to that, it's going to cause error, which is very difficult to be detected.